All right, we are back after lunch. And for the next hour or so, we have folks from the Agency of Natural Resources here. It is our wildland fires update. And we're going to kick things off with basically just like a broad overview. This is subject matter that we really didn't dive into much last biennium. So this is really new for all of us because most of us have actually only really served one time on this committee if they are returning, with the exception of Representative Hooper of Burlington. So with that, we'll start off with some introductions with ourselves, then we'll kick it over to you. Representative Matt Byron, Chair of the committee, reside in Virgins, represent Addison 3, which is Virgins, Ferrisburg, Waltham, Hampton, Addison, and about a third of New Haven. Vice Chair Hango is in a different meeting and will join us shortly.
Representative Pincinel from Dorset, and I represent the Bennington 1 district of DMV Mount Tabor, Dorset, Waynesboro, and Peru.
Michael Moore, Grand Isle, Chittenden, represent Albert, Pilemont, North Bureau, Grand Isle, South Bureau, and the western corner of Milton, wherever it's at. We communicate.
Yes, absolutely.
Commissioner.
The Great Forest Land of North Burlington. Bob.
V.L. Coppin, Windsor 2, so Cavendish, Weathersfield, Baltimore.
Mary Catherine Stone, Burlington.
Jay Hooper, Brookfield, Braintree, Randolph, Granville, and Rockford.
Hello, I'm Shay Waters Evans from Charlotte. I represent Charlotte and part of Hansford.
And we are missing Representative Boyden of Cambridge and Representative Nugent of South Burlington. And beyond that, yeah, you had mentioned Hankins, but thank you.
Great. Well, nice to meet those that I haven't met before. For the record, I'm Danielle Fitzko. I'm the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation. And since it's the beginning of the biennium and my first actual time in this committee, I figured it'd be good to start off with just a high-level overview of FPR. A little background on myself. I've been with the department for over 20 years. For 15 years, I served as the Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager. So when you said the Great Forested area of Burlington, in my eyes, yes, there's a lot of trees in Burlington. I worked hard on thinking about making those trees in downtown areas, maximizing their potential. I was Director of Forests for 4 years, and I've been Commissioner now for 2 years. When I think about FPR, our name kind of tells you what we are. We're forests. We think about the health of our forests, keeping our forests intact, sustainably managed, and resilient. We're so fortunate in Vermont that we are forest strong. We're 76% forested. Most of that lies in private landowners, about 80%. We also manage about 350,000 acres of state lands. We're Vermont State Parks. We have 55 developed state parks all across the state in many rural areas. This year, we welcomed over 1 million visitors to our state parks. That's just during the operating season. I think the number would be staggering, recognizing like year-round use of our state parks. Like right now, we're not in operation, but people are still going and using our lovely public lands of our state parks. And then we're also recreation. It's actually in Vermont, we have the second highest GDP that brings in nationally, bringing in $4.2 billion a year to the state. We're just behind Hawaii. Recreation is growing in the state. It's diversifying. We have more users, and we're responding to that need. Governor put in place in 2017 the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, and we've been granting out dollars to communities to really enhance economic development, and we're starting to really see that impact. I think last year we granted out over $6 million, and it's really is making a difference. We have about 130, 140 year-round staff in all three of those divisions, plus the business office. We do have 12 people in our business office. If you can, it's really a pretty busy business office. We bring a lot of grants in, a lot of grants out. But if you can imagine running state parks, which is like a business in state government, I can't tell you how much like toilet paper and ice that we buy. A lot of transactions going on. So they are like the heart and like circulatory system of our FPR. So we have about 100, 140 year-round staff, but in the summertime, we blow up. We bring on about 450 seasonal staff to run the state parks operation. A lot of times we have to provide housing because people come from all over. We kind of look at state parks as come work for us and try Vermont, and a lot of times they come back year after year and they stay. So that's FPR. Sometimes we call ourselves Forest Parks and Fun. I'm gonna shift now and talk about wildland fire, because in our forestry division, we have a lot of programs, but that's about 60 people. And everything from forest health, thinking about the health of our forest, the urban community forestry, private land forestry, state lands. But we do have a wildland fire program, and that's what we're here to talk about today. With me, we have Kathy Decker. She oversees our forest protection program, and that's thinking about forest health and wildland fire. And we have Dan Dillner, who you'll hear from. He is our wildland forest fire supervisor. He oversees our wildland fire team. We also have Oliver Pearson. He's our director of forest, so oversees that whole forestry team. And then Kate Eberly, she is our principal assistant. She kind of does legislative affairs and communications, and she helps me out quite a lot. Wildland fire is a hot topic, literally. I think we're all devastated about what's going on in California. We know about the fires that happened in 2023 in Quebec, and this past fall was really an active fire season here in Vermont. Things are absolutely changing. It wasn't just in Vermont, it's this whole region of New England that was pretty active with fire season. We've been thinking about this and changing our programming for the past several years. I'm really happy where we're at now, but I know there's more to go. Just 2 years ago, we had 2 staff that probably spent 20 to 25% of their time in wildland fire. Now we have 3 full-time staff that have the fire credentials, the real professionals and expertise to help lead Vermont's response, which really is in partnership with local fire departments, Vermont Fire Academy. And we provide a lot of training and support, and we do response as well. Dan's going to sort of give you the overview of like where we've been, what's sort of happening, our full programming, and sort of like what's next for us. I know you're going to hear some needs, because there are some needs as we really build out the program to be really responsive going forward. We're looking at under the couch cushions everywhere to sort of meet those needs, but I can anticipate next year, we may be coming to this body to ask for some resources or policy changes to really support what it looks like to have a robust response and suppression effort in Vermont. So I'm happy to answer any questions or put the real expert on, Dan Dillner, to kind of give you the lay of the land with wildland fire. But happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I think why don't we just keep going with the information
Okay.
immersion right now? If there's no questions right now, I think what I'll ask.
Just comment. I would have to say and I have no reason to do this other than it's just true, is that Commissioner Fisco is probably one of the most responsive people in state government I've dealt with. So I appreciate
Thank you.
your very timeliness. And she's one of those people sort of like Secretary Flynn, like I'll get stuff from Joe Flynn at like 12:01 in the morning from like, dude, you ever sleep? But but thank you for,
Yeah.
you're very responsive, and that's appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Reach out anytime. Apparently I respond. No, I'm more than happy to. The relationships matter and being responsive matter.
Sure. So what I want to ask the committee right now, because it's like, I really do want to like take in a bunch of the information right now as presented. So unless it's like a huge question, write them down and hold them for when we have a little break in the conversation so they can get through their content with continuity without disruption. So, thank you.
So my name is Dan Dillman, for record, State Forest Fire Supervisor for Vermont Fire Forest Parks and Recreation. Happy to be here today. All right, so my plan for today was to give you kind of an overview of the whole wildland fire program. So some of the things that we do, excuse me, tying in the accomplishments of the past year. Like Commissioner Fisco mentioned that we have recently changed, so wildland fire became its own program. Before, we were combined with forest health staff, and this made it so we could have experts that would focus just on wildland fire, and get that experience and training to be able to advance, which we'll talk more about. So I'll talk a little bit about the accomplishments and then some of the response capabilities and the responses that we've had in the past year. And then getting into some of the stats, and, kind of looking deeper at this past fire season in 2024, and then some specific fires this fall, and then a little bit on some where we want to go in the future. But there should be plenty of time for questions. So, like you mentioned, this is our fire program of 3 full-time fire folks. I'm the supervisor and also working supervisor covering a district, but we have 2 other wildland specialists that cover 4 different areas of the state. I don't know, one of the main 4 parts of our program is education and training. Working with the Vermont Fire Academy, we teach, this last year we taught 460 students, so there will be volunteer firefighters that are getting certified as part of the Vermont Firefighter 1 certification program, which covers all aspects of firefighting. We teach the wildland portion of that through the Vermont Fire Academy. We teach in some high school tech centers, evening fire department refreshers, fire wardens. So all of that throughout the year is a big part of our program. Another part of our program is fire prevention. Obviously preventing fires is a lot cheaper than suppressing them. So one part of that is the town forest fire warden program. So by statute, every town has a forest fire warden, which regulates, they're the one who give a permit, which is required for burning natural debris. And so we oversee that program. We have 300 town forest fire wardens and deputies across the state. We also do a number of outreach programs for fire prevention. Smokey Bear, this past year was Smokey's 80th birthday. And so we had kind of expanded to do a whole lot more programming than we had normally done in the past. So we did things throughout all the state parks, fairs, libraries, schools, and fire departments can borrow our equipment, our Smokey Bear costume, and get prevention materials to hand out to kids and community members. We did a great big program sponsoring the Lake Monsters game this year, which was a pretty great success. The other thing we did, which I didn't put on here, was a lot more social media and outreach. Whenever we got those elevated fire condition days, a ton of outreach going out, which I think helped a lot. Really supports the fire warden. Daily, we issue fire danger for the state. So we put it on our website and we have an email notification that anyone, not just fire folks, fire departments, anybody from the public can sign up. So just Google Fire Danger Vermont and you'll find it, and you can sign up for it on our website and get notifications of what the daily fire danger is. We do that from mid-March through end of November. We have a program with some federal funding from U.S. Forest Service to help towns, volunteer fire departments in towns that are under 10,000 in population, so rural towns, get wildland fire protective equipment, clothing, tools and equipment, hose, pumps, hand tools, all that through this federal grant where the towns pay 50% and the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service pays the other 50%. So a small town orders $5,000 worth of gear, cost them $2,500, and they order it through us. We order from the Department of Defense through a program. So it's a really great program that we do every year. And this year, 31 towns participated for a total of $58,000 worth of equipment. Lots and lots of pants and shirts and hand tools that come to our Essex facility that we sort out and get back up weekends. We have a prescribed burn program, pretty small, but this past year we decided to partner with the U.S. Forest Service, the Green Mountain National Forest. They do a lot of burning, mostly for wildlife habitat, but we combined with them to help them on their areas and burn so we could get more experience and training. We're trying to bring our program up to national standards, and it takes a lot of experience, a lot of actual on the ground work to bring your qualifications up to the next level. And so working with them was a great partnership to help us, our staff, get that experience. And no better way to be a better firefighter than to actually work with fire on the ground. But not many people know that we actually are a responding agency and respond to fires. So although we're small, we actually are part of the state's response system for active wildfires. And some years it can be just 1 or 2 responses, and this year with more, which we'll talk about in a minute. But some of the things that we can provide when we do are, expertise in fire behavior and suppression. Firefighters that are nationally certified. So above and beyond the Vermont Fire Academy training, we go through a national certification, which maybe you heard of, like people being red carded. It's like a national training and certification that we get, that if I go anywhere in the country, my training will be recognized. They won't have to say, well, are you really trained? They'll look and say, oh, here, this is what you're qualified to do on a fire. We have some specialized equipment, which we'll talk about, and we are kind of the gateway of bringing in resources. So when I say resources, it could be personnel, equipment. If we needed aircraft in Vermont, we would be the ones that can order that through a national system. But I also wanted to take a second just to talk about how fire response works in Vermont. So you've all heard of 911. So if you call 911, say you have a small brush fire in your yard, maybe you were careless, or maybe you saw something down the road and you notice there's a fire. You call 911. Your local volunteer fire department responds. They get toned out. Or if there's no fire department in your town, then there's a fire department that covers that town. There are still a number of towns that do not have fire departments. So they respond to the fire. It's during the week. Only 2 people responded, volunteer fire departments. It's no secret that they are having a hard time getting extra numbers. So they respond. They probably call mutual aid to the neighboring towns. 2 or 3 towns show up. 99% of the fires are easily handled by those local resources. But maybe the fire gets a little bit bigger. Or what happens when we get called is a fire tends to go more than 1 day. Volunteer firefighters, they don't have the ability in general to work multiple days on an incident. They get in, get out, get back to their daily lives, go back to their jobs. That's where we come in. They would request us to come and assist them, and we would show up with some expertise to help for fire, especially if it goes multiple days. So we do have a team of wildland firefighters that are nationally certified. There are 15 basic firefighters. We have 6 folks that are on incident management team qualified. So, when you think about a large fire incident, you've got firefighters digging on the ground, but you have a whole lot of other infrastructure managing that fire. A national large incident management team might have 100 different positions on. We have a few people that are qualified to do that, not a lot. We're growing that program. We have 3 folks that are trained up to the next level to be able to supervise. So we can have a whole ton of firefighters who are just basic trained to work, but you got to have some folks with experience, and it takes multiple years to be able to supervise people in a dangerous situation. So overall, we certified 23 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in 2023, we only did 12. So we're working to try to expand that because we see a need. Just some of our equipment that we have, 3 response vehicles. So these vehicles just carry some of the basic tools and equipment that are often requested from us to assist towns. Towns have, a good amount of equipment, but sometimes they need some more hose or a certain type of specialized pump, or some assistance that we have ability to bring some of that equipment. The trucks don't carry water, they just kind of carry the tools that are needed. So we did do 9 response requests this year, which was 9 times more than some years. But last year, I think we did 1 or 2. It's normal for us to have 1 or 2 to 3 response requests. Usually it happens when we get into more droughty conditions where the fires are going to go longer duration because they're down in the duff, deep burning. Well, the fires this year, most of them, if you look, there was 1 or 2 staff members that responded. So it was usually our request for some expertise, maybe a little bit of equipment or tools. But, primarily, a couple in the spring, but mostly it was in the fall. And we'll talk more about the fall fire season in a little bit. But, one of the fires that was kind of unique was this Morgan Road fire in the town of Barnard, which we'll talk more specifically about. But you notice we had 17 FPR staff on that fire, as well as folks from the U.S. Forest Service and the state of New Hampshire sending an engine over. So there's some agreements that we have in the compact, which we'll talk about. So those agreements, mutual aid resources, so if a town needs us, they request us through Vermont Emergency Management, like any other state resource. If we decided we needed to call in the National Guard helicopter to assist, we're the person, the agency that would make that recommendation and decision to request that, and then ultimately go through VEM and the governor's approval. If we needed resources, wildland resources, a whole national system of moving resources from, now they're headed to California. In the fall, October, November, they're headed to Connecticut and Massachusetts. So all across the country, resources are moving, assisting each other, and we're the entity in the state that would order up those resources through the Coordination Center in New Hampshire. The cool thing is we have agreements with local members in the compact, which I'll talk about next, the Northeast Forest Fire Protection Compact. Maybe you've heard of it. Vermont is one of the founding members, established in 1949 after the devastating fires in Maine in 1947. The members of the compact include the New England states and New York, as well as the eastern provinces of Canada, which is pretty cool for us because Quebec has a lot of resources. They could help us out. They have a lot of aircraft. Maine has aircraft. So we also have a part of the compact membership is we have agreements where we help each other for free for 24 hours. So, New Hampshire engine came over and assisted us. They did not send us a bill. So we'll go over and assist them per day, no charge. We order up, aircraft from Quebec, we'll get a bill. But it's available. So we could order them. It just costs a lot of money. I guess the next slide, I talk about we sending resources to Quebec. So we send resources out of state. And why do we do that? Well, we send the folks out to assist nationally so they can get experience and training and advanced qualifications so they can help Vermonters when we need to. But the cool thing is we were able to help on 20 different fires in several Western states this past year and get some of that experience, which turned out to be pretty necessary this fall. So we won't let people leave Vermont when the conditions are, elevated fire, high risk conditions here. But during the summer, as you know, we were flooding through a lot of the summer, and it was a time where we could send our firefighters, wildland firefighters, out to other states. So that worked out well. And the cool thing about that is not only do we get training and experience, the Forest Service pays for all the costs of that travel and all of our time. So it's no cost to us. So it's a very great win. And then in 2023, when Quebec had fires that burned 13 million acres, twice the size of Vermont, we were able to send a few firefighters up to assist with that on the compact. And they reimbursed us for that. So we sent 5 folks on 4 crews, and they did a lot of work. All right, so kind of shifting gears, looking at our situation here. And so this is looking back the last 25 years. So fires numbers, seasons go up and down. It really depends on the weather during spring fire season. You can be in a drought, but if you get a little bit of rain in the spring, you're not going to have a lot of fires. But, so we don't have a great trend line that shows like a huge increase of fires every year. So one thing I always explain when people ask me, about fire causes and about the fire, the fires that we're having in Vermont is our fires are human caused. Like 99% of them are human caused. And it's not easy to, predict human behavior. You can have all the fire conditions out there. And we often see where like we'll have a lot of fires in moderate to high fire danger. And then we get up into that very high fire danger. We don't see more and more fire. We have more potential, but fire wardens shut down burning, gets out on social media, people realize it's high fire danger, and so the numbers tend to go down. So a lot of it's human behavior that you have to factor in, which makes it hard to kind of put a finger on what's going on. But we do think things are changing somewhat. I'm looking at our neighbors, to Quebec, which isn't far, looking at, the significant wildfire activity in New England this fall and what we had for fires this fall. So we do think things are changing, but not every year we're going to see a record year. So this year we did have an above average year. We were at, above the 10-year average and for 96 fires and 179 acres. We're looking at some of the causes. Again, like I mentioned, not a lot of natural fire, so we had one lightning fire. But we did have, normally debris burning is probably one of the most common causes where it's usually about half of our fires where folks are burning debris illegally, so they didn't get a permit, they decided they were gonna burn their brush anyway, and it got away on a windy day. But this year we had improper disposal of ashes is kind of a big one, where later in the fall, we had some elevated fire conditions and people weren't really used to that, and they were burning their wood stoves, took the ashes out and caused a number of fires. And that I really actually jumped up to being about half the acreage that we burned. So we really stepped up outreach during that time, social media, press releases. We also at that time put a burn ban on, if you noticed that. I think that comes up shortly. So in the fall, just looking at October, November of this past year, we had 38 fires, which was about 3 times the 10-year or the highest in the last 25 years for numbers of fires. But it was 18 times higher than the 25-year average for acreage in October, November. So it was kind of an eye opener in terms of, wow, things went really fast. It was like a perfect storm of beautiful dry weather in September, leading into October with just a little bit of showery activity, not a lot of rain, and then literally nothing after the leaves fell off. So you had all this dry fuel, really fluffed up leaf litter that's very receptive to any kind of a spark or ember, and low humidity and a ton of wind. So some of the highlights, that kept us kind of on our toes here was this year we instituted a new plan for our statewide wildland fire preparedness level. It's a 1 through 5, kind of using a national system that other states do as well. And so we did have 14 days at level 4, which is the second highest level, which meant we were, having staff be on notification, they on standby, on call, paying people to be more prepared to respond, giving instructions for our other firefighters who have, foresters and others that have different jobs to have their equipment and PPE with them. We did have a number of days of elevated danger. Even moderate fires can escape, and we had 75 days throughout the season on that. And we did that burn ban, which isn't really a burn ban. It is a order for fire wardens to stop issuing permits to burn debris. The public always seems to think it's a burn ban, which it kind of is, but that's not exactly the way the legislation or the statutes are. But that was the first time in almost 10 years that we have issued that warning out there with cease to burn. Most of the causes during that time were power lines coming down with wind and improper disposal of wood ashes, but we wanted to try to do what we could to eliminate other, needless causes of debris burning. That map on the right just kind of shows you the red flag warning area on the 15th of November.
Representative Hoover.
Who decides if there should be a ban?
So our department makes that decision we have statutes under the commissioner's authority, and with our recommendations that's when we're monitoring the fire danger daily, we're really looking at the fuels and deciding what we think and looking out. We worked highly with the National Weather Service, looking out, okay, we don't want to put a burn ban on and have it rain the next day, because that makes, it doesn't look well, it doesn't look good. It also, it's kind of a lot of work to go through all the steps to put that in place. So we look out for long periods of time and say, you typically put them on for 2 weeks. So we did it, the first one for 2 weeks statewide, then we extended the southern part of the state for another week, and then we ended up doing another week also. And so a 30-day total. So we're looking at it and deciding if it made sense. Fire wardens can put a burn ban on in their town anytime they think it's appropriate, and they usually do. So, we don't like to step in necessarily and do that when often the state's very different. It can be, in April, for instance, in the Northeast Kingdom, it might be deep snow. In the Champlain Valley, it might be high fire danger. So a statewide burn ban doesn't make a lot of sense. Sometimes it's just easier for local control to decide whether burning makes sense. But in this case, because of the conditions, and we also knew that our mutual aid, our assistance, the compact resources were mostly in Massachusetts and Connecticut on those fires. So we were gonna have a harder time getting assistance. We thought it made a lot of sense to put a burn ban on. Just kind of, I put this picture in here just to show you the drought that we were in November. But today, this morning, I looked quickly at the map. It's not a lot different. It's almost the entire state is abnormally dry with some in moderate drought. Still, so even though we have some snow on the ground, southern part of the state is still in a lot more drought than the north. So we'll see how that works when the snow melts and we start spring fire season. So looking at that fire danger in October, the 17th through 27th. The 27th was when we had that fire, that Morgan Road fire in Barnard, which was one of the larger fires that we've had in the forest in a long time. The fire danger went to extreme that day. So those are the adjectives, like on the 17th, it's low, then moderate, then high, very high, high, very high, so forth. But like I said, other states in the east were experiencing some of the same conditions. So that made us a little more nervous to know that we were gonna have a hard time getting assistance. And, there were some fatalities in neighboring states on a wildland fire from, in Connecticut and down in Long Island, New Jersey area. So we weren't alone. So there's that Morgan Road fire that I talked about. So there are 2 structures lost. And that was caused by improper disposal of wood ashes, and it burned very quickly. And there was a real need for us to assist on that fire. Local volunteer fire departments in the whole area were there for the day, but they really had to get back to work. So we ended up working 2 weeks on that fire. Just due to the remoteness of the fire, we ended up putting about a 6,000 foot, so more than a mile of fire hose out to reach the fire. We had folks from the U.S. Forest Service in agreement and them and the state of New Hampshire to assist, and almost all of our trained and red card staff there as well. It was actually a great learning opportunity, as well as, helping us try to, build our structure and kind of plan for an even larger incident. So it was in general, it was a very good learning fire, but it was certainly exhausting. That map in the bottom corner is a result of some great cooperation with UVM Spatial Analysis Lab. They have a drone that has infrared, and they were able to map. So those little spots on the map are heat. So the yellow is the hotter areas, and they could give us that, and very quickly we could have it on our phone and be out on the fire. Even though there was no cell coverage or very little, we could see where we were, and so we could concentrate our efforts on those areas that we thought had high potential to escape.
So it's basically like an infrared GIS.
Yeah, but I mean, it was very, very helpful.
Oh, sure.
What are these, other things?
So yeah, I didn't put the key when I did that. Those little stars, that was me walking around finding a little additional heat on the perimeter, and I put it on there. I walked that perimeter and made that map.
This was the 12-day?
Yeah, that was like on midway. I made that and noticed a couple more little spots so we could go out and work on them and people could find them.
Yeah. How big was your barrier?
So the town ended up having access to a dozer that was nearby from, I think, in some logging activity or forestry or some, I think it was logging. They ended up using a dozer, putting a perimeter line around a lot of which really helped slow it down.
Yeah, but like how wide is it, like 30 feet? What is it?
How wide was the line? The dozer blade, so I don't know, maybe 8 feet.
Yeah.
6, 8 feet.
So it was just one push.
Yeah, they just, I mean, this fire was primarily in leaf litter, so down leaves. Those hotter areas were where there was concentrations of softwoods, so it was primarily hemlock and spruce, and the fire had gotten down in the ground. And so, instead of racing across the leaf litter and burning quickly and going out quickly, it was holding a ton of heat there. And then when you had windy days, it was throwing embers out, and we were concerned. There was another structure about 400 feet away, which if you look down I think you can see it in the pink dot down the bottom left is another structure. It didn't burn. And then it really actually was only half a mile to the school. And the amount of time that it took this fire to get this big was just only a very short couple hours. So we decided that it made sense to put some resources on it, and we did.
What's the white divider line there?
That's a road. It's
Yeah,
a,
road.
it's like a seriously class 4 road.
Well, it looks like
Very, very rough road.
you guys had no water anywhere.
No, so we had to haul the water in. The town, most of their firefighters had to go back to work, but they were able to supply a tanker shuttle and bring water up near the fire so that we could put in the tank and we could pump water up to the fire. So that helped. It took, several days to get that whole system in place. But yeah, it was a challenging fire. All right, so the last thing I want to just talk about is some of the goals of the program. Obviously, our main plan with shifting our program and separating out is to have wildland be its own program was to really prepare for what we think might be some impacts of climate change and increase in fire activity. I think we're working towards that. And another part of this is really coming up with a detailed plan, and we've made a lot of strides in the last 2 years of how we would deal with a large fire. We don't have everything we need, but we are working. We've actually ordered resources from out of state now. We had never done that ever. So even though it doesn't sound like much, but actually just getting Forest Service to come, that's a whole process. And we know how to do that now. So that's great. A goal in the future when we have more capacity is to build a emergency firefighter program where we have other trained citizens that can go on fires nationally and be ready to respond in Vermont. We don't really have the capacity to build that program yet, but we think that would be needed because there's going to be a time where we're not going to be able to get resources probably, but we're going to need to help ourselves. We have mentioned it's in other forums that we are looking to try to purchase a wildland engine. Towns all have engines, structural engines, most have brush trucks, but an actually typed wildland engine, national standards, has some unique capabilities. One being a really high pressure pump to move water a long distance in elevation, where most towns have volume pumps to put a lot of water on structures so that they can go more off-road. For instance, on that Morgan Road fire, we could have driven a type 6 wildland engine right up to near where those structures had burned and put water on the fire very quickly.
You actually just got in front of my first question for you.
Yeah.
It's about heavy equipment, and do you feel like you have the appropriate gear to do the job, knowing that we're seeing more frequency with this stuff?
No, we don't.
Ballpark, what's the price tag on one of those units?
$265,000.
I thought you were gonna go higher than that.
No, I mean,
I thought we were talking at least low set figures. Okay.
no. So it's not crazy expensive, but we're turning over every rock. We're looking at other grants in various avenues, but we are still working on that.
So like matching grant with the Fed kind of thing, like couple of like $1 in state to matching $1 Fed. Or am I jumping the gun here?
Well, I mean, we are working and trying to find out if there are resources at the federal level. We're coming up too blank there. We've identified a potential loan program within the state that we may be able to access, and we're working with Treasurer's office now to see if we can access that. So we're trying to explore all the options, and that's why I say, like, if we come up blank, we're gonna be coming back probably to this body next year and asking for some resources, because we do want to have them available to us. We were lucky this year. I hope we'll be lucky again next year, but we need them. And we're looking hard right now.
Okay, well, consider us a resource with helping find those dollars to get the appropriate gear for you folks to do the jobs promptly and safely. Representative Cooper Burlington.
One moment, please, and that was Danielle Fitzko,
Correct.
Commissioner, Forest Parks and Rec, speaking from the sidelines.
And she actually opened up the presentation, so she had been
Perfect.
introduced. So, and this is Representative Hango, Vice Chair, who was just joining us. So,
Have you picked this stuff up surplus, military?
Not really. I mean, they don't really have, they're not a wildland engine, and they may have various things, but I think, so every town has engines, they have stuff. Even if they had one that was really great for wildland, like they can't leave their town for days to fight fire in another town. So we need to own something that we can use to assist town all over the state. Military, we have access to getting surplus equipment. We've been watching for one for the last 2 years. They don't come up very often. If they do, they're in bad shape. By the time the federal agencies are finished fighting fire across the country with them, they're pretty worn out. And we have no in-house ability to, maintain an engine, work on it, fix it. We have no capability to do that. So I don't feel like it would be useful for us to get some piece of equipment that's worn out. It'd be better to not have, it'd be better to call in another state and assist. So that's sort of the gist of it.
Understood. You have limited garage capacity.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any in-house mechanics anymore. We have just the three of us, and I do all of the maintenance on our main equipment as well as on the program.
You in essence.
Yeah. So, yeah, and the other thing I wanted to add is that we are hoping to expand our use of prescribed fire. So fire that's been planned for use of wildlife habitat. That's kind of a goal, is to build that program up, because it's a great way to get people to have experience. All right.
Representative Hughes first. Okay, Representative.
I guess my question is, we know that you're in this, the fire prevention. How healthy would you say that our forests are in Vermont? Do we have a lot of dead wood that has not been properly managed or overlooked, that we need to do some really good property forest management? So
That's a
that
great
our
question.
forests stay healthy and not have a lot of risk.
I think our forests are very healthy. I mean, maybe Kathy or Decker would address that from the forest health aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are very healthy, and I think when I think of a healthy forest, it's not just about the most lively, vibrant trees. We need a lot of other things to support the wildlife and all of that as well. So when we look across the state, I think we're very, very healthy forest. I mean, there's obviously things coming that we can't manage ourselves or control, something like on the last board and things like that, but overall, I think we're in a very good state.
Would you like to join Dan at the table? We have you as a list for witnesses here, so I don't know if you had anything else to add beyond just a little conversational backup, but while we still had about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, on that piece, I think I've covered it, but.
Yeah, maybe you could explain the difference between western forest and our forest.
Yeah, so I was gonna add, so you hear this in the news, like, burning more fuels management more out west. Could they have done a better job in California? Our forests really aren't the same.
Yeah.
So it's complicated to explain that, the northern hardwoods forest, which is primarily the bulk of what we have in Vermont.
Yeah.
If we went in and cut out and removed all the dead wood, burned it, cleaned it, raked it all up, it's not healthy for our forest type. It would actually probably make things dry out more and potentially cause tree mortality from drought. Where actually all that vegetation, most of the time, actually tends to hold moisture in our forest because of the forest type that we have. Certainly it's a little bit different, like in the Champlain and Connecticut Valley, where it's more oaks and pines. Some natural fire may have been more part of the ecosystem, but so managing is a little bit different here. We would want to maybe manage fuels around structures. I mean, we don't need miles of lawn, but having a defensible space around a building is probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Going out and raking and cleaning the forest for fires is really not a thing for the northern forest.
If you ever hike like the Sierra Madres or something like that, or hiked here, it's just like a different.
It's very
Yeah.
Very, very different kinds of fuels. And we're not gonna have on our northern hardwood forest, we're not gonna have a racing crown fire burning on the tops of the maple leaf. Like if it gets that dry, the leaves are gonna fall off. And even if it's summer, if it gets that much of a drought, they're gonna shed their leaves and it's gonna be a leaf litter fire. Places like the Northeast Kingdom or extended area of softwoods, we could have fires that would be burning in the crowns, and that's a little bit different. So it's not quite the same as out west. To answer your question?
Yeah.
We have a pretty good snapshot on the future of fire fighting technology. Are we gonna be using drones and things?
I mean, drones are already used really, really commonly on wildland fire for mapping, for heat detection. Every day, large fires, often at night, they're flying large drones to map the fire. They're using it to do burnout operations. So a lot of times fire is fought with fire where, they maybe put a line in with a dozer or people, and then they burn those fuels off to the main
Right.
fire. So instead of having a fire line that's like, 3 feet wide or 6 feet wide, now it's a mile wide. But instead of having to put people out in there and burn it, they have drones that actually are pretty good size, and they drop these, like, they're like ping pong balls is what they are, where they're injected with, I think it's, like basically antifreeze, injects them, whatever's in there, and it causes them to burn out, and they can use that to light fire. So there's a lot of technology that they're using. We don't have any of those. I don't really think we need them here.
That's what I mean.
Now. Having access to drones with thermal imaging was pretty excellent. It would be even better that it came and were used for us and we didn't have to try to run them while running the fire. That was pretty. So having that technology is pretty helpful.
So we did some work in here last biennium with a sort of just redoing state maps as a whole with LiDAR. And that project was going. Do you feel comfortable with the maps you're working off of now?
Yeah, I don't think mapping is a real issue. The forestry staff is very good with, having the latest GIS stuff. Most of us now just use it in our phones. We have all kinds of layers of maps. So like on this last slide here, we thought we were done, but nope. Right before deer season, actually after the first weekend deer season, we had this fire in Starksboro that was putting up a smoke column and getting a lot of 911 calls. Thankfully, the Forest Service was really close by with a whole bunch of folks from Washington and Montana. And so they were able to put all those young people on the fire, which was pretty excellent. But the folks on the ground were able to send me, I was home in Montgomery, and they were able to send me waypoints and a shapefile of the perimeter, and I could work on my computer and I could send them back some mapping, limited somewhat by data on my home internet, but still they were able to get some maps. And by the next day we had a great map of the fire. So pretty easy reading.
Do you want me to get my Fire 2 certification to be red carded?
From like the Fire Academy?
Yeah.
So red carding is different. The classes that we teach with the Vermont Fire Academy is not part of the national certification.
Okay.
Getting a red card is kind of a different animal. So in order to do that, you have to work for an agency that red cards people. So like you couldn't do that from your local fire department. So we would be red carding our state employees. Hopefully someday in the future, we'll have a program where we can bring on non-state employees like other states do and build that. We just don't have the capacity for 3 of us to do that right now. But the US Forest Service does that as well for their folks.
So do you do the training and you do it?
We can do some of the training now. Yep.
I would make a comment on that. I'm Oliver Pearson, Director of Forest. Dan, could you go back a slide, because you covered that in the 3rd bullet. Create emergency firefighter program and develop staff with fire line supervision qualification. As Dan said, we need supervision to bring people out safely on fires. Having said that, the fires this past fall have led to sort of a wave of interest with people asking the same question you just did. We have capacity, we have staff that want to get certified. It might be the conservation districts. I was with them yesterday. They asked that question. We have 10 staff that want to get red carded. Can you do that for us? And the answer is hopefully in the future, but not today, because we don't have enough staff with fireline supervision qualifications. So that's something that I think we're thinking about. The National Guard has reached out as well to say, hey, can we get our staff red carded?
Jumping in front of all my questions.
Yeah, so it's an interesting situation where there's interest and awareness, but with 3 staff, only 60 staff in our whole division, and the resources that we have, we're not able to do that today. We'll be thinking about and how to make that happen, particularly if fire danger continues to be as high as it is in our spring or fall fire seasons.
Well, we plan on picking up work on emergency response for natural events and also those caused by humans more in depth this year. So I definitely have also spoken with Deputy Secretary Martin about some of this stuff. So it's very much been bouncing around in my mind and some of the others at the table. So we look forward to developing some like actual policy points with you folks. So feel free to start putting language together so we can start building some legislation that helps you folks out both operationally and functionally, like financially as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, the way the wildland fire supervision works, a person doesn't supervise more than 5 people. So if we had 100 trained and red carded beginning firefighters out there, like that's not gonna really help us we're not gonna send them out on a fire without someone to supervise them. Right now, we have 3 people that are qualified to supervise other folks. So it's just like, we need to build our capacity first before we start bringing on a whole lot of bodies, which seems kind of ironic. But it's just kind of the way it is. You would be really, it would be wrong to send somebody out on a fire, on their first fire, even if they've had the training, without someone there to look after them, make sure that they were safe.
Oh, totally, yeah. Any other questions for our friends?
I have one last one. I could have sworn there was a fire in Williamstown or Northfield that I didn't see on that list.
Well, the list I showed, those were the only, the fires that we helped with.
I see. I could, because I thought you did go up to that one. I wasn't at that fire, so I don't know.
Not sure. You're on a local fire department?
I'm on right now, center, yeah.
So the fires, we get reports from volunteer, or from the fire wardens.
Mhm.
So it's, we don't get, sometimes we don't get every single one, we get most of them, but sometimes a few get missed. But the fire in Norwich, I don't think we actually worked on that fire.
Okay.
We get called about it, but I don't think we actually went to it.
All right, yeah.
I think we get called that one in the night, but we didn't actually, by the next day when we responded to call, I don't believe that they needed any.
Oh, that is, yeah, I guess, right. You got to call and they go as well. Yeah. One last one.
New Hampshire.
Where is that coordination center?
It is in Campton, it's at the White Mountain National Forest.
And that is probably a pretty functional launch point for.
So it's a coordination center, so they don't have people sitting there. So requests come in from somewhere in the area or outside the area and a resource. So California right now, obviously, has a lot of resource needs. If you're going to their local areas in California, probably going to Great Basin, Coordination Center, Rocky Mountain, then all the way coming to the eastern area, and then ultimately, the state of New Hampshire is one of the last, but we're the farthest away, and no one could fill it, and they say they need an engine, and that's where they would coordinate it. It may come from Maine, Connecticut, or whoever. But they're the kind of the way things get traveling around with Wyland. Wyland has its own dispatching throughout the country.
And those municipalities typically have career departments, right? Not.
Right, so it's not municipalities typically, it's agencies like state and federal agencies that are sending resources out.
Okay.
Municipalities don't usually send resources out of their municipality.
I see.
All right, with that, thank you so much. This is the very beginning of a lot of dense conversations we're gonna have with you folks, so I look forward to it. And we are gonna move on next in a moment after a quick bio break to the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back around 2:00.